You see a lot of these guys driving back and forth to work in their pickup truck because they're a dual purpose vehicle. It's a commuter vehicle, but it's also the thing that tows the boats to the lake on the weekend. It's the thing that tows the camper to the campground on the weekend or on vacation. Maybe they do side jobs or they're the weekend warriors that are like building something in their house and they use it for that. They have a trailer for it. That's actually a good chunk of that market.
Right.
So anecdotally or perceptively, we think now they just drive to and from work. You could say that about me, but my truck has been put through quite a bit of use.
Right.
I've used it very specifically for what it's for. It's just it's not every day that you do that.
Yep.
So roughly, 51% of the market is actually work-specific vehicles. Of the other 49%, a good chunk of that is people that use that truck for its purpose. They just don't use it every single day, 90% of the time. So they might use it anywhere between 20% and 5%, and that's when you drive value for that customer. Don't focus on the 80% use case. That's not market value. Real value is in the 20% or 5% that's left, because that's when you have something, it becomes useful. It becomes something that you can actually apply to whatever it is you're specifically trying to do.
Okay.
And that's where you go from, God, this thing is a piece of shit, to I love this thing. Right? Yep. It's that thing where you don't get frustrated anymore. You're like, hey, I got my job done, I got whatever it is I wanted to do, and then also I can go to work on Monday.
Yeah, and you're also developing cab and chassis, so you're going to be able to do custom work bodies on here, and it's going to be capable of doing all this and do it well, and that's all that is being engineered into these products.
So we're very intentionally focusing on those use cases, because if you look at the market, people that buy pickup trucks, the SUV market is moving to pickup trucks, right? It's the new family vehicle, but pickup trucks serve a purpose beyond just being a family vehicle. It's the idea of what they can do. We want to focus on the work market very specifically. Yes, consumer market's open to us, but focus on that work market. One, it's the largest chunk of the pie, but two, it's also an opportunity for us to go beyond just vehicles. So Atlis is not just a truck manufacturer. We're an ecosystem company. We're a technology company.
Okay.
And we're really focused on not just the vehicles, but the energy team, battery technology, charging systems, that ecosystem that's out there. Then we're focused on the platform and what we can do there that's in adjacent markets that we're not chasing today. So think upfitter markets.
Okay.
And then, of course, when we get to the vehicles, we've now built that infrastructure out with the first two pillars. And once we get to the vehicle side of things, then it's pickup trucks, it's bigger pickup trucks, then it's vans and various different vehicles after that we have planned.
Okay, and let me also mention, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, when you talk about the best-selling vehicles in the United States, you're talking about pickup trucks, you're talking about a Ford, Chevy, GMC, those products, but those people who are not thinking or not in the know, I guess, about all these sales are thinking, well, that's just those regular trucks that go down the road. They don't think about the work body trucks, and those are all included in those numbers. Is that right?
All of that's included in those numbers.
And your guys are you are focusing on that. That's a market you're going to get into. Like if we talk about Tesla, they're not focusing on that market at all with the Cybertruck.
I think, Tesla's focused on lifestyle. Rivian's focused on lifestyle.
Right.
Atlis is really focused on work and that ecosystem that's there. The energy side, the platform side is our foray into various different segments within that environment. The pickup truck is our brand sort of launch into that. That's how we get in the front door with these organizations and build brand confidence.
Yes.
Then future vehicles that we have planned sort of are still planned within that ecosystem. So it's not just trucks, but it's very work-centric, work-specific applications.
Okay.
So if you own a farm or you're in the agriculture business, we want to be eventually sort of that one-stop shop for your equipment and vehicle needs. And make it very easy to own those, very easy to maintain those things. Not just sell vehicles, but work on the fleet management, the maintenance management, of that entire sort of ecosystem, simplify that for you. So you can focus on your core business, which is whatever it is, farming, construction, mining, whatever that happens to be. We'll try to provide the solutions that make that possible.
All right, and then one thing to bring this all back around is that you are a company that's, of course, all electric.
Yes.
So you're basing everything on electric architecture, optimizing everything for full electric, whereas if you look at traditional manufacturers such as Ford and Chevy, I don't necessarily think that they're doing that.
They're trying to build on platforms that are exist, or they are making a switch, but it's a much more expensive, much more difficult switch for them. Dealership models are not built out for this. Their sales models aren't built out for it. Their vehicle architectures are not built out for this. It's also catalog engineering. So it's a lot of
parts bin technology.
Pull it together, assemble it, and distribute it. Huda is very familiar with that environment.
Okay.
Working at past startups in this particular space, as well as Chrysler, right?
Yeah. So I was working stationed out at Chrysler, and my past experiences also Faraday Future and Byton. So it was also based on like, okay, what is in the market, and we just kind of were putting everything together. And when you think about as a startup, that doesn't work because you really have to look at your architecture. You really have to develop everything in-house in order for you to meet, your mile range, in order for you to meet your customer needs. So that at Atlis, and like as Mark explained, that's what we are developing everything in-house to meet that customer needs, meet the mile range that can take you 500 miles.
Yeah, and you're not constrained by past technologies.
Correct, or what's off the shelf.
Yes, because in most, if you're looking at legacy manufacturers, their stuff is off the shelf, is all ICE-based.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Correct.
Their body control modules, the entire vehicle architecture is basically, the only thing different is the drivetrain. The rest of it is built off the existing architecture and systems that they've done for the past 20, 30 years easily.
Yeah.
Whereas we're looking at this thing from the ground up.
Yeah, I think you have a tremendous amount of advantages in doing that, in my opinion. So I think you're doing a great job.
Right. And there's a slight delay between when the throttle opens and when the engine receives enough air to generate enough power to break things loose. And then once you do that, there's no finite control in that.
Correct.
So it's this very difficult thing where it's like
talking about traction control.
Yeah, when you talk about traction control, you're talking about like cutting the throttle, right, and closing that valve, basically the throttle body that's in there, or applying the brakes to a specific wheel to reduce the amount of actual power that's put down to that specific wheel, or transfer it to another one, or use differentials and all sorts of complexities, clutch systems and stuff like that. There's like an endless degree of things. But a lot of that is, in fact, all of it is almost this concept of like, let go, release, let go, release, let go, release.
Until you develop some friction or you lock on something.
It's more or less you put too much power in a location, so grab a hold of that location, put that power somewhere else. Okay. And then move it back and forth. I mean, all of those systems are kind of working on more or less on that principle.
I see.
With electric, it's more of how much power can I put down until it releases? Yes. And then back off from that and do that in milliseconds.
Okay. Yeah. So with an ICE vehicle, you've got all that power. You've got to do something with it. Yeah. That's what you're saying, right?
It's very difficult to do precision power delivery to a specific location, versus like coming back and doing, okay, well, how much power can I put down at this specific wheel versus this wheel versus this wheel versus this wheel, and dialing that in to a very, very, very precise number from an acceleration standpoint.
Yep. So electric is a huge benefit over that.
Yeah, the electric is like, what would be the equivalent? I think of it like, trying to come up with a great example, but it's more or less just like the difference between operating software systems in like a computer game where you can control something and it very precisely moves, and that system, versus like going back to old school toys and stuff where you're just playing with like, wood pieces or something that's just like you bang stuff around or just move stuff around. It's like the toys from the 1920s versus toys today, which is all digital.
Yeah, total paradigm shift. Yeah. If I say, when I talk to people and I try to explain this, especially people that have never driven electric before, it is a paradigm shift, like you say, but also you've got to have a well-designed electric vehicle. Just any electric vehicle, if I take certain older models, like I won't, without saying anything bad, I'll say like for instance, the Nissan Leaf never had a complete temperature control system on the battery pack, right? And they had problems with it. It just wasn't designed well because they had to keep costs down for these early models.
And it's all traditional is cost-driven. It's finance-driven development versus customer-driven, technology-driven. And we try here not to focus on innovation for the sake of innovation. That's the first time I think I've said Chris's quote without butchering it.
Good job. Nice quote.
We try not to focus on innovation for the sake of innovation. It's really trying to solve a problem. So
problems are opportunities in disguise.
right. So any new technology that you introduce should not introduce new problems that change the previous experience and make it less than you've experienced before. It should always be a step forward or a leap forward. Electric vehicles today, in some aspects, are leaps forward, but then in some aspects, they're leaps backwards.
Right.
In terms of that experience. Battery technology currently in the current implementations as well as the upcoming ones with a lot of startups is still a leap backwards in customer experience.
A leap backwards because of, I think you and I have talked about this before, like for instance, I'll come out in the cold weather to my car and the battery pack is stone cold, it's almost frozen, and then because of that I have almost zero regenerative braking.
Yeah, I mean lithium freezes below what, 0 degrees C?
Yeah.
So when lithium, like when that electrolyte begins to freeze at lower temperatures, that completely negatively affects performance of that vehicle.
Yes.
So all of those things do matter. And when you think about internal combustion engine vehicles have had over 100 years of innovation. I remember in the 80s and 90s when you couldn't start your car in the middle of winter. That is not a problem you have today.
Right.
Right? Even a diesel truck, yeah, you have to, in really cold climates, there's a different fuel, right? Because there's an additive that's put in there for that. But having my diesel truck from 2013, I remember going through, the northern states and those extreme cold environments and never having a problem with it starting. It always gets up and it always runs. And that performance is consistent when I'm doing that.
Right.
Whereas
Because they've had so many years.
Today,
yeah.
when it's hot or when it's cold, there's a compromise that has to be had there. And that in my mind is not acceptable. That's a step backwards or a leap backwards. So while it's cool to have gimmicks and games and all these fancy things inside the car, if the basic experience is not satisfactory, then it's a negative sort of, it's a negative for that particular product. Think about the first iPhone, right? The first iPhone had apps and all these toys and stuff, but what did Steve Jobs show in the presentation? He showed how cool and easy it was to make a phone call, right? Like he showed the basics of what it's supposed to do and what added features they made that basic experience better with. And then on top of that, you had everything else that's there. With electric vehicles, today it feels like sometimes we're focusing on the apps and the other stuff, but we forgot the basics.
Right.
So we need to get back to the basics.
Yeah, and with the work truck, you need that thing going to work right away at the minute you jump into it.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, my dad would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning because somebody was in a ditch or somebody was in an accident or something like that. He'd have to go out, get in his truck, his tow truck, right, and drive to that site. There was no scenario where that thing wouldn't start, it couldn't work, or couldn't get out there and do the job. And sometimes those are long distances that he'd have to go to get that in the middle of northern Michigan.
Super cold temperatures.
Super cold temperatures, really crappy weather, conditions you don't want to be stuck in. So when I think about the experience I have today, would I do that in a Tesla? Probably not.
Yeah.
But Atlis building this work truck, that's a use case that we have to focus on. We can't make that compromise. Even though where I'm from, the winters aren't that bad anymore.
In Arizona, yeah, Mesa, Arizona, where we are, right?
Yeah, so, but in particular, it doesn't really matter in those use cases, they still exist, and we still have to design for that. It still has to work in that scenario. And it can't, it's either going to be that good or it's going to be better. It can't be less. Show some of the detailed stuff there.
We won't show,
Obviously, you can
yeah.
see most of that stuff there.
Yeah.
So that's the XP platform.
Secret
We're
stuff.
showing the videos and everything over there. It's got most of the systems installed right now. On the motor systems, gearbox systems, integration with the battery pack, and actually what all that stuff is they're developing the vehicle dynamics controllers, the logic systems, pedal integration, brake integration and stuff for all the brake-by-wire stuff, as well as because it's 4 individual motors, right, you have to have each motor travels at a different speed. There's various different characteristics and stuff that are kind of built into that. So we actually, we're a startup, we're on a budget, so we raise the system up, we bring it up off the floor, and that allows the team to actually just run the system constantly over and over again as they do that. And then we drop it back down, we do some rolling tests and a couple of other things, and then it's sort of a back and forth operation.
And this is a skateboard design. That's what they call it, right?
This is so this is our skateboard design. It's the the concept and prototype. It's a buck, basically. So
Yep.
it's not finished product. This is something where we take things off, we put new things on, right? It's sort of butchered, so to speak, from, remember the original concept we showed online when we did that? That was a concept. Now it's, things are implemented into that, right?
Refined.
Things are wired through it. It's not going to be pretty. It's not, it's very much so a development vehicle.
Yeah.
So the systems that they're specifically focused on right now is all the prototype systems for the drive control units and everything that's involved there. What's different between the industry, even Tesla, and what these guys are doing is how we're integrating the cooling systems, the battery management systems, and everything into basically a structural module.
The cooling
that's built
system is going to
into
be structural.
So the cooling system will be structural. So whether the battery packs are technically immersed in fluid, but it's not really a true immersion because they're flowing and things are moving through there.
They're completely immersed?
Yeah. So, and then the second thing
That's dramatically different, because I think, if I understand right, Tesla just uses tubes,
they use tubes, and then there are others. Faraday's, I think, doing submersive cooling. Nikola did a version of submersive cooling in their packs provided by Romeo Power.
Okay.
It's not abnormal in the industry. What is completely different, though, is what these guys are doing from a structural integration of the cooling system. So imagine eliminating the heat exchangers and stuff that are up front in the vehicle, because our requirement is that the battery pack is a self-contained unit. It's power management, DC to DC systems, DC to AC systems, cooling systems, all of that is basically a module that's loaded in. And it's structural in how it's actually constructed, but you don't have like a separate radiator system for cooling on the outside of the pack. All of that is actually integrated into the structure of the vehicle.
So it's integrated into the structure. Are you able to give us some details on that? How do I,
not yet.
Not yet.
I have a hard time envisioning that.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is the more detail we go into, the more we give away.
Yeah.
But just imagine like combining all of those systems together into less parts, less components.
Yeah, less parts is good. Yeah.
In terms of what it is.
Yeah,
So
of course.
when you look at, say, existing EVs that are either in development or on the market today, there's hundreds of feet of coolant lines running through.
They're like one of these geothermal heating systems for your house, basically.
Yeah. We're eliminating those more or less completely within the vehicle. So we don't want cooling systems and valving systems and all this stuff running all over the place. Each one of those is a failure point. Each one of those is a wear point.
True.
Each one of those is an extra component that we have to buy and engineer and install. For every component, right, that's a failure mode that's there. So if you have 100 components, it's 100 times 99 times, it's 100.
Nothing lasts forever.
Factorial,
yeah, every part will break at some point.
Yeah,
Only matter.
So the FME for that is a nightmare.
Yeah. So if we can eliminate all of that headache and complexity, it's more work up front. It's a much harder problem to solve, but it's actually a much simpler implementation. Correct. So, when people ask how do we get to market faster, well, you start by taking 100 components and throwing them away, and starting with, can I do it with 2 or 3?
That's also why you're going to have a big advantage here as long as you do it right. Again, going back to that well-designed type of electric vehicle, because you're not using the parts bin technology we talked about that are designed for ICE vehicles, which has ridiculous amounts of parts. I know that EVs themselves already have much lower amounts of parts, but you're going to take that a step further, it sounds like.
Correct. So if you look over here, this team over here is really, it's drive modules, vehicle dynamic systems, steering systems over there, brake-by-wire. Like, that's the team that works in this particular corner over here. If you turn around here to the other side of the building, back there, sort of along the back wall and everything, we've got the fabrication team. So they're working on, we've talked about box truck integration. So that platform can actually take that cargo box that's being painted and finished back there, and we can actually install that on the back.
Right.
And then we have a mock cab for a box truck over there in the corner. So we can actually demonstrate this modular concept of what the platform is. So that platform, there's no mechanical linkage outside of the body mount fasteners for each of these different pieces. Everything is drive-by-wire.
All right.
So what is it? It takes us, 15 minutes to unplug and pull it pull the top off.
That's it.
Yeah. And most of that's just walking around and screwing a couple of things and moving and mechanical gantry systems to move it. So basically what we can do is we can take that box system, or way over there in the corner is the off-road buck that we've shown off a few times now in a few different videos. All of that stuff is plug and play on that platform.
All right.
So rather than develop a system that's claimed skateboard, that's really just a cutaway of the basic vehicle, that's a true drive-by-wire modular skateboard system.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The front and rear drive axles are identical, including the suspension systems, the subframe systems, all of that stuff.
Because they're all these wheels are steering? Is that right?
In this particular model, we took steering out of the rear, but yes, they're all steering in the final production model.
All right.
That's there. On the other end is the front, actually, of the platform, and that has the prototype for the drive-by-wire steering system.
Okay.
So back here in the corner, we've got fabrication, model building, and things like that. Coming up in January and February, we'll start the construction of the XT prototype. So that's what everybody's sort of anticipating that comes in. So right now the teams are finishing up some of the design work that's there. We're working with suppliers to get some of those parts made. So a lot of that stuff's going to start coming in January and February, and we'll start showing off those builds. All of that will actually happen along the sort of the back there. Over there in the corner, or on that side, that's the energy group, where the battery labs, cell labs, and stuff are going up. So teams are working with partners to get the quotes in to get stuff kicked off there. We've actually kicked off an arrangement with a university to start work on the final chemistry that's going in the cells. So we're hoping to finalize that by February.
Are you going to be producing your own cells ultimately? Is that what
Yes.
this is? All right.
Yep.
So everything's in house then.
Yeah. So everything's in house. And then back here, actually, this group that's sort of huddled right there, that group is actually focused on body control systems. So we're developing, basically we call them Omega modules, that are basically body control modules, but it's a single design that can be used in different systems. So today, in a vehicle, you have you have a body control logic system, and then you have separate HVAC modules and systems, separate chips, separate software, separate everything. Doors are different, headlights, taillights are different, trailer controls, interior lights are different, or they're controlled by the body control module. There could be anywhere between 20 and 30 separate body control systems in a vehicle. We're developing one modular system that can be applied in all of those locations. So we can basically dev once, validate it, put it through its paces, beat that thing up, and then it could be installed anywhere in the vehicle, and that reduces the amount of complexity, time, engineering effort, resources that we need to apply to that particular problem. And then those resources can focus on what that plugs into. So if it's simple, relatively simple things like windows or door locks or lighting systems, whether it's interior or exterior lights, if it's seat controls, heating and cooling systems, again, all of that is modular and integrated into it. Nothing's shared between the platform. It's just power and communication rails that come up.
Very nice. Okay.
So we're trying to eliminate the 2 miles of wire that's in a vehicle and create basically communication buses and power buses that run along the chassis actually of the platform. And then when you drop a vehicle body on top, you just plug into it.
Okay, very good. I also want to mention here, right before we finish with this little segment, that normally there would be folks at all these workstations, but because we're here on the weekend,